Hey, thank you for checking out my channel. Today's video is going to be all about the Line6 Helix and how I use it for electric guitars. So come on, join me, let's learn something. Alright, hey guys, I've been asked by a lot of people how I run my Helix. So this will be a little bit of a demonstration of that and different ways that you can set it up. So my signal path is my guitar straight into my Helix, and that's going stereo with the XLR outs into my Presonus Firestudio interface. And then that is going into my MacBook, and I'm just recording it in Reaper. So there's no effects or anything post-production going on with the Helix chain. So what I've got here in HX Edit, I'm just using this because it's easier to see and work with. This is just the US Deluxe, your Deluxe Reverb. This is the amp and cab put together. So the easiest way in the Helix to get a sound, actually I need to move this back, to get a sound is simulating how everything would go in front of the amp. So if you're using your actual amp and you want to simulate like your pedal board going to the front, it'd be like this. So you would start typically with like your wahs or compressors or fuzz or things like that. I'm going to start with a compressor, just and then after that I'll put a distortion. So I like the Timmy or the Timmy. And after your delays, I'll normally run a few different, not delays, I'm sorry. Your distortions, I'll usually run a few different kinds. So I'll have a tube screamer type thing, and then after that, have a more full ranged drive. I like the Dyna drive or the Zen drive, I think is what it's copying or emulating. So it's a lot darker, but more gain, kind of beefier. So if I turn this compressor back off. The voice on here really kind of opens it up a lot. So if you turn that up. So that one, I will typically run a little bit hot. And then that gives me two gain stages. So my clean sound. To my distortion, or it's kind of a light crunch type distortion. I'm actually going to cut some of the bass because this amp's really bassy. That would be my first gain stage, and then the second one would be the Zen drive. And then if I wanted to put both of them together, that would be like if I needed just more. You can also, I'm going to scoot these over, run a boost. So the ones that I like is the Kinky Boost, which is like a EP booster. Boosts you can run before or after the drives, depending on what you want. So if you put it before, it's going to push more into your drives. So we're going to turn the drive down and see what that. No boost with boost. Doesn't add a lot if you turn the actual boost on. You can hear it start to work. Then, for instance, like in front of the Timmy, it really thickens it up a lot. If you put it after the drives, it's going to boost your drive sound. So with it off versus on. So it just takes what you've already got and raises the level of it. With it like this, it'll actually make the amp compress a little bit more too, but a couple of different ways you can do it. The other boost that I really like it in the Helix is the Minotaur, which is like a clone, especially with a Strat. It really does this mid hump or boost, which with a Strat sounds fantastic, as we all know. It really makes it cut through. So the one I typically use a lot is the clone. Then after that, you have your modulations and delays and reverbs and stuff like that. So let's add a reverb. So the one I will typically add is the 63 spring. It's a little bit much. Turn it down a little bit. And then your delays will typically go in front of that. So let's do the transistor tape. Turn the feedback down, the mix down a little bit. So the reverb I'll typically leave on all the time, and then the delay and the everything else you can turn on and off. And then if you need some compression, and let's add like a chorus just or something just for modulation. And turn those back off. Sounds pretty simple. It's probably your most basic setup you can have, just everything running straight into the front of an amp. One thing you can do in real life that you can simulate with the Helix is you can split your modulation effects or your wet effects and have a dry signal going all the way through to the amp. So how I did this is just pulled them down. So this is my chorus, my delay, and my reverb. And then if I turn that back on. So what that will do is it will allow the dry signal of the guitar to stay true and not mess with the affected signal as much. Another way you can kind of do that and actually make it sound a little better is simulate a effects loop. So with the amp, you can't do that with them together, so you have to split it. So we'll come down here to amp. I was using the deluxe. Then I'm just going to put the same cab we had. And then we're going to put these back up here. I'm going to delete this just so I have that block open. Actually, I'm going to delete that one too. So with them in line, all like this, that is basically putting your chorus, delay, and your reverb in the effects loop. Which automatically will sound a little bit better than with it in front of the amp. You can really hear that delay and reverb come through. Excuse me. After that, we can do that split as well if you wanted to, but you gotta have to be careful doing this because you're doubling your signal. So sometimes it can be a little weird. And you can already tell it's a lot louder than with it in the same thing. So again, you have to be a little careful with your levels. But that's another way you can get your dry signal all the way through. A third way you can do it, a third way, you can run the effects like your reverb and your delay after the amp. So this will be like simulating post-production. Like adding in the effects in to your DAW after you've recorded. And then you can split them down like that too. So you get that dry through, and then you have the one extra that's got the effects on it. You can also pull this down and have two separate outs. That's really all it does though. So if you don't want them going to the same routing option, you can do that. Sorry, that goes there. But this is all still in mono. So if you wanted it to be stereo, I'm going to keep these two after. You can't make the cab stereo. However, you can add another cab. So I'm going to pull this down and we're going to add a second cab. Let's do the Fullerton. So now we have two different cabs. It's all still mono though, so what we need to do is pan one side left and pan the other side right. One thing I'll typically do is, if I'm running like this, is I'll put the delay on one side and the reverb on the other side. And that will just help keep those separate and a little bit cleaner. Another way you could do it is actually, sorry, I deleted the wrong cab. Make your delay and reverb stereo. So you can come up here to this little drop down and click on stereo for both of them. The 63 Spring doesn't have that option, so you have to go to the double tank. Oh, sorry, it's still pan left. There we go. So now everything after the speaker is stereo. You can do that with these effects too. So if I wanted this chorus to be stereo, you can make it stereo. But if you make it mono, and for instance put it after your two stereo effects, you're going to make everything mono again. So you have to be careful that once you make something stereo, everything after it has to be stereo to keep the stereo image. Then if you find yourself running out of DSP power, don't forget you can click this little arrow over here and go to path 2. So that unlocks this whole second path that took me forever to figure out whenever I first got the Helix. So what I'll typically do is I'll run my reverbs and my delays and things that take up a lot of power in one side. That way you have more freedom on the other. It doesn't change how it sounds, it just changes how much power, signal power you've got. Another way we could do this is you can actually, now that we've got the second routing option open, is we can add another amp. Okay, so stereo amps, the way that I will normally do it is I still have this deluxe Fender Deluxe amp. Sorry. It's more of a kind of dark and mid-scooped kind of amp. So typically you want to think contrast to that. So the first thing we need to do is add another amp. So what I added is a Vox AC30 with the Celestion Blue speakers, or the Bluebell speakers. That's going to be really bright and chimey. But if I turn them on right now, where this is just going straight into path 2, it's going to run the Fender straight into the Vox, and it's going to sound terrible. So we need to pull this down. So we have this split in front of the Fender, and also pull that down so that's not going to 2. So now we have 2 different sounds, but it's still in mono. So again, go to the outputs and pan it left and right. So we've got our stereo amp set up. Another thing you can do if you want to make it kind of sound double tracked is put a really short delay. So I'll typically will do like 25 milliseconds. Turn the feedback off, turn the mix all the way up. And you get more of that kind of double tracked guitar feel. It's still a fake way of doing it, but it's a way you can do it in the Helix or routing options like this. Let's add some reverbs. So the reverbs, I do the same thing. I'll typically go a little bit darker on one, or use 2 different kinds of reverb. So like on the Fender, we're using the 63 Spring. On the Vox, let's use a plate. It's just a normal plate. See what that sounds like. So the plate reverb is a little long, so let's turn that down. And that way, again, you get 2 separate sounds that will complement each other more. We can do that same thing with delays. So let's keep the theme going here. So let's use a tape delay with the the Fender. So a warmer delay, and we'll use the Vintage Digital, which is just an analog delay. We're going to make that really bright. So that's cool. We can make it better. So one thing that is very common for guitarists to do is we will sync them to where there's a short delay and a long delay. So what I just did was I clicked this little clock. You can change it by millisecond if you know the exact number, but the easiest way to do it is hit the clock. That will switch it to the tempo mode. So whatever you have your tempo set at. It will be at quarter notes or whatever you set it at. So like half notes, dotted half notes, so on. For this one, we're going to keep it at the quarter note. And the analog delay, or the digital delay, excuse me, we're going to put it at dotted eighth notes. So now, so it's more of that stereo feel. So you can really hear the differences there. Then you can do the same kind of thing with, I'm going to move this up and move these back, with a modulations and stuff like that too. So for instance, let's have, I don't know, a harmonic tremolo. So stuff like that can get a little interesting sounding because you have a solid signal on one side. I'm going to turn the delays back off, and the modulation on the other side. So at first, if you're not used to that sound, it can be a little odd, but it can be cool too. If we do it with like a chorus. It's kind of like that effect where you get your dry signal through. Or we can do two different kinds of modulations. So maybe like a phaser on one side and the chorus on the other. That can be a cool effect too, especially coupled with your delays. You can get all kinds of neat sounds and stuff like that. Be right back and I'll show you how I personally run it. Okay, so this is how I will normally run it. So doing it this way, you get your dry signal in the middle and you get a stereo field of your wet effects around that. So I'm using one amp. I've still just got the Fender Deluxe, and if I play it, oh, sorry, I forgot to change this back. So we're back to our pan's back to center. It's mono. So what we need to do is come down here to our later effects and make them stereo. So there's this little arrow and drop down menu. You want to click on stereo, and then the double tank is your spring reverb. I don't like the modulation effect on it. You notice it's, man, that decays for a long time. It is now just the same amp, but it's stereo. And then same thing for the delays. We need to make that stereo. Now to get the dry signal, we can do it a couple different ways. The first way you can do it is you can take, for instance, like a gain block that's not doing anything, and pull this down and have that going to your output. Oh, I need to pan that back, sorry. Now try it. And that will give you the effect. So you have your dry signal in the middle and the stereo effects on the outside. Another way you can do it is delete that one and pull these down, and then pull that down as well. And that's a way to do it if you need, for instance, more DSP power at the top or at the bottom. Either way, and you can do it either way. I will typically do it this way and have the stereo on their own path at the bottom. And then this way too, if you wanted the chorus on both, you could leave it in front of the split. Or if you wanted it just on the dry path, so it doesn't affect your delays, or you could have it just on the wet path. Either way, it gives you a few options of routing that. How I will typically do it is, which you've heard a lot of people say this about the Helix, is they like to simulate going into a compressor and an EQ at the end of their chain just to help smooth things out. So to do that, you run a stereo compressor. I like the LA Studio comp. And then run a stereo EQ after that. Do the the tin pan. And I'm just going to pull the low end off a little bit and a little bit of the high end. It's because sometimes the digital can get weird with the high ends. Turn this off too, the chorus back off. Now what you should notice is no matter how hard I pick or how soft I pick, your volume stays the same. So if you want to be more dynamic with it, you don't want to route it like this and have those there. But if you want your sound more smooth and consistent, then this is a good option to go with. You can use these live as well. I've done it like that and currently run them live like that. Sometimes it works. Most of the time it works. But sometimes if you need more dynamic range, you need to use a volume pedal because your picking hand's not going to give you the dynamics that you're used to. Running it like this, if you want that delay effect that we were talking about a minute ago, where you have the dotted eighth on one side and the quarter on the other side, that's going to be this scale feature. So at 100%, it's the same thing on both sides. 50% is completely opposite. So on, if you want the dotted eighth, it's going to be 67%. So you get kind of thing. That's how I will typically run it, is at 67%. And then doing it this way, you still have your dry path, and then you have your stereo path combining with that, so it's still dry down the middle and stereo on the outsides. You can also pull this down if you want and have this going to A and B. That's another way you can route it, and it'll do the same thing. But if you didn't want that split to be there, you can do it like that. Now, if we look at my actual preset, this is the one that I've set up that I use live. Oh, sorry, got to turn the volume on. It's set up for snapshots and to be a pedal board both at the same time. So I have the divided duo, which is a divided by 13 amp, and I'm running a IR as emulating a Celestion greenback with it's a 2x12 with the 57 on it. One thing you need to do and be careful with, especially with IRs and digital things like this, is use your high and your low cut. For me, I found that 6.5 kilohertz on the high cuts make it sound more like a real amp, and I typically will roll off the bass to about 85, sometimes to 100 if I need to. Because if you don't do that, sure, I'll give you the example. No high cut. It gets this weird high-end sizzle kind of frequencies that you don't normally find in a real amp. So doing it like this will give you more of a real amp kind of sound. So the way I typically will run my stuff is I have a fuzz going the first thing in the chain to the Timmy, just kind of my general purpose breakup, edge of breakup kind of tone, or first gain stage kind of tone. Then I have the Zen drive or the Dyna drive. It's emulating a Zen drive for my heavier distortion. It's kind of like a scooped bassier kind of full range kind of thing. Then I have the Klon or the Minotaur, basically just for the mid push, but also use it as like a solo boost. Then I have a phaser after that in front of the amp. I just like that sound better than with it later. Then my amp, so it's all set up for snapshots. So the the parameters will all change depending on what snapshot it's on. I can show you how to do that in a later video if you are interested. So if you are, let me know and I'll make a video about that too. And then after the amp, I have an optical tremolo. It's not set real strong. I'll go through the clean sounds here in a minute, but just basically gives you a just a little bit more character on the sound. And then that's going into my IR, so that's kind of like in the effects loop of the amp. Then after the amp, I have my volume pedal, and then it splits to do that drive-through thing I was talking about. So I have my dry signal, then I have my wet signal, and actually I have my wet signal on a really, really short delay. So it doesn't, you get that more stereo image kind of thing with it. So it doesn't work when you have another amp so much, but just for effects, it usually works fine. Then a chorus, a harmonic tremolo, then my tape delay, then I always have a spring reverb on, and then I have a plate reverb and the particle verb. So the plate reverb is more of if I need something that's just spacey in general, I'll use that. The particle verb I'll only use if I need like swells and things like that. I'll demo this in a minute. But basically it allows your dry signal to come through and then it swells in a big plate reverb kind of sound after that. So the clean sound is pretty straightforward. It's bright, not a lot of bass, but not too bright. Now I've got that studio comp and that 10 band EQ that I just talked about after it. With the studio comp, to get a little bit more dynamic range, you can take this peak reduction down. So in that case, it acts more like a limiter. You still get a little bit of compression. It brings up the floor on the bottom just a little bit. But I can also get my dynamics. Not as much as I can without it, but you can get a little bit. And then I also run the Minotaur just for a little bit more mid push, because without it, sounds fine, but with it, it really cuts through. Sometimes it gets a little buried without it. So that's why that's there. And then the optical trim, so it's not doing a lot. Basically just adds a little bit of character to the sound. The phaser. Everybody loves a good phaser. The dimension is a chorus. And I typically like that better than the actual chorus that you can find in here. But the harmonic tremolo, if I can talk, it's almost kind of like a univibe kind of thing. Almost. Then that reverb I was talking about, here's the plate reverb, the glitz reverb. So it's not over the top, just if I need something, like if I'm playing a line that needs to have a little bit of space to it. And then the delay. So it's got that syncopation with the scale at 67%. If I go to the second snapshot, so this one I've labeled Timmy, so it turns on the Timmy pedal. So this is my general purpose kind of overdrive sound. And you'll notice that the parameters change a little bit. And this one, it turns the clone off, so I can use it as a solo boost. And then with the delay and the reverb, you get some really cool sounds through that. The third snapshot is the Zen drive. So this is my more distorted. Kind of drive sound. And this one's got the Timmy and the Zen drive on, so the Timmy's set real low, so it's doing that old two screamer effect. So it's taming the bottom end a little bit so it doesn't get too boomy. And then my Dyna drive or Zen drive. And then again, I've got that Klon, so I can use that as a solo boost. Without it. With it. Sorry, since it's single coils, it's a little buzzy. And then in any point in that, I can add the fuzz to it if I want. So, like on the Timmy. Or on the Zen drive, this is going to get really noisy, but... Or on the clean, I can add it. And basically it's a little different sounding. So again, I like that contrast. And I'm using the pocket fuzz that they just added to it. So it's really mid-rangey and unlike the fuzz face patch that they've got in here, the Arbiter fuzz, it's got a lot of bottom end. I don't really like that. So it's, for me, it's hard to tame. So this is more of the fuzz kind of tone I've always wanted. So I can add that in at any time. Then the last patch here, or the snapshot, are called swells. Basically, it's just that. So it's got these big reverb trails. So this has the particle verb turned on. So if I put it, this is just the particle verb. So you can hear it, how it kind of grows. And then I have the delay and the reverb. But what I've done is I've used the snapshots to turn the mix on the delay up. And on the reverb, it turns the decay and the mix up. So you get really big reverb. And then I've also got the chorus, or the dimension, turned on just for another little bit of character. So that's how I typically will run my electric setup. I'll run or show how I do acoustic setups in a future video. So if you're interested in that, let me know as well. All right, thanks guys. See you later. Okay, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing so I have more lessons and videos out in the future. Also, remember, down in the description box, there's links to my social media accounts and my personal website, www.joshuaparkermusic.com. There you can find more information about me, lessons, free video lessons, and PDFs, and all kinds of other goodies. So go check it out. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.